Welcome to Shift, everybody. Whether you're in person or online, we're glad to have you here. For our online people, you can scan this QR code, and for the people in person, you can go back to the welcome table. If you fill out the Connect card, we will send you some free Opus coffee. Our t-shirt store is back up and running. If you missed the deadline last time, no worries, we got you like always. You can scan the code here or at the welcome table, click the link. You'll pay there, and once you're done, you can have it shipped to you or you can pick it up at the building. Our next online-only Sunday is going to be November 27th. It's Thanksgiving weekend and lots of people are going to be traveling, and we want you to enjoy your holiday without having to worry about anything. So grab some pumpkin pie, sit back, relax. Our service is going to start on our YouTube channel at 10:30 a.m. And that's all the announcements that I have for you guys today, so let's jump into the final week of Up in My Feels.
Have you guys ever been around somebody and just felt like that instant connection? Like whether it's, it's like a friend or, somebody you're dating or, or a significant other, almost like there's a buzz, just something like you can't really put your finger on it. I've had that with several people, where there was like the just instant connection. But I have never had one so strongly that I could predict the future, except for one time. All right, one time. Tori and I were friends in college. That's my wife, Tori. Tori and I were friends in college, and we were both dating different people. As a matter of fact, she was dating one of my really good friends named Brent, who later came out, and then he's also part of the original board of Shift. So we're still good friends with him. But they were dating, and I was dating a young woman that will not be named here. And we both, I just mean to protect her identity. I didn't ask her if I could tell this, so I didn't mean that she's Voldemort. She was at the time, but she's fine now. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But we both thought, Tori and I both thought that we were going to marry the people that we were dating, and obviously it didn't turn out that way. Both of our significant others made decisions that negatively impacted those relationships, and because of those decisions, our prospective relationships ended really rough, and then right about the same time period. All right, and because we were friends and kind of going through similar circumstances, we talked to each other about what was going on, right? Because not many people, everybody understands, but like she was in the middle of it, I was in the middle of it, and I knew she knew what I was feeling, and she knew I knew what she was feeling. And so we started talking. Now, the college that we went to is this small, conservative, evangelical Bible college, and they didn't trust us as far as they could throw us. So there was no opportunity, like I couldn't go in her dorm, she couldn't go in ours. It was like there was guys' dorms and girls' dorms, and there was no intermingling. So this was before the days of texting and all of that stuff, FaceTime. So all we had was a phone, right? And we talked to each other on the phone. And the more we talked, the more we hung out. And the more we hung out, the more we talked. And we talked for hours on the phone together. It turned into this weird, like, are we or aren't we kind of thing. And people were asking us all the time, are you guys dating? And we're like, we're just hanging out. Stop trying to label us, man, right? It's just like, we're just hanging out. Because honestly, we had both just been so hurt, right? And so we weren't ready to like get back into anything serious. And so it just was what it was. But I will say that it's college time. So like in our, late teens, early 20s, and that's when like road trips start happening and stuff. And so we're all part of the same friend group, and we went on a few road trips together. Not together, but like there was a whole big group of us and we were together. And we, usually found our way sitting next to each other in the car, van or whatever, and just so much flirting. It was driving me nuts. All right, just so much flirting. And I know that I think I've mentioned it here before, but all of that are they, aren't they kind of stuff changed on February 15th of 1998 in Turtleton, Oklahoma. Yes. There's a date and a location. Yes. So we had gone to a friend's house for that weekend. It was Chickasha, Oklahoma. All right. Chickasha, Oklahoma is the name of the town. It's just this little tiny town in Oklahoma. It sounds, you're probably picturing like tumbleweeds and a road, and that's kind of what it was. It's Oklahoma. So we went to his house and we hung out all weekend and stuff, and he showed us his high school and blah, 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 all the things. So we stayed too late on Sunday because this is like a good 8-hour trip. And we stayed too late on Sunday to make it all the way back to our college in time on Sunday night. And so we're in the middle of the drive, and my friend Jeff, who's lives there, he's like, hey, my grandpa lives about halfway. He said we could just crash at my grandpa's place, and then we could get up early Monday morning and make it back. And we're like, that sounds better than trying to drive through the night, getting back super late. So that's what we did. So we decided to do that. And it was that day. It was February 14th. All right. It was Valentine's Day. So there was some expectations. You know what I mean? It's like love is in the air, and we were like months later. You're looking at me weird. Don't pretend like. All right. But here's the deal. February 14th, and I don't remember what it is now because this was a long time ago. Had something to do with the previous "they shall not be named" person, right? And I don't remember now. I couldn't remember what the connection was. Something, and it was a Valentine's Day thing, but something specific happened. And I'm like, Tori is not sharing that date with Voldemort. It's just not happening. Okay, it's not gonna go down. So we got there, and we're hanging out, and it's a cold, clear night in just the middle of nowhere. Turleton, Oklahoma is nothing. There's nothing. Okay, there's no jobs there. People live there and then drive away from the place to work. I mean, that's the kind of town it was. And it was a clear, cold night, and we're standing on the front porch of this guest trailer that we were all crashing in. And it just after midnight, when it turned into February 15th, on that trailer porch, we had our first kiss. And yes, that's my son. That's my son, ladies and gentlemen. And I listen. I will tell you this. I instantly fell in love with her. I knew right away. Now she took some convincing. Right away that I was going to marry this young woman. I mean, just the instant connection. Like, I saw the future, and it was her. All right. It was. This is what I wrote down because I journaled through college, and I had an entry on this date talking about that I was going to marry her, and I said it was the indescribable connection that ripped through the fabric of space-time continuum and gave me a glimpse into the future. Okay, maybe not that dramatic. I hyped it up a little bit, but it was this immediate and intense connection. So I want to welcome everybody to Shift. I'm the lead pastor, Joe, and this is week 3, kind of wrapping up a series that we've called Up in My Feels. And in week 1, a few weeks ago, we looked at the idea of compassion. And sorry, I got worked up thinking about that story. We talked about the idea of compassion and what compassion actually means. That the word compassion is my favorite word in the Greek language, splagnizomai, which means to yearn from the bowels. It's an emotional, it's this emotion that drives us to a physical reaction. Like you don't just feel bad, it drives you to do something about it. Last week we looked at anger and how anger is a human emotion, and that it is not sinful to be angry, and that we need to be able to learn how to use anger in a right way. And we looked at the story of Jesus flipping tables, and that his anger was directed at systems that hurt and harmed people. And his anger was never really directed towards the people, even the ones that were participating in the system, but that his anger drove him to love and to heal, right? This week, we're going to be looking at this idea of connection. And so I want to welcome everybody, whether you're online or you're in person. If this is your first time you're going to find that Shift is a place that's going to give you the permission and the space and the time to really wrestle and to ask any kind of question that you need to, and the time to figure it out, to do all that stuff. One of the hardest things that I think collectively that we have been through in the last few years is isolation. Right? That was, for me, that was the hardest part about the pandemic, the shutdown, was feeling isolated, like losing connection with other people. And even when we started figuring out, like, you know, using Zoom and all that stuff, and it was great at first, right? There still wasn't, it just wasn't the same. And people burned out on Zoom and all that type of stuff because we just didn't have that kind of connection. And we all felt that we weren't with our friends and we weren't with our families for far too long a stretch. My wife and I, we went 2 years without seeing our family face to face because they were in Missouri and the shutdown, and both of our families, my family specifically, are really immunocompromised. And so, I mean, if my mom got this, it could kill her. So it was that loss of connection that created all kinds of bad, right? I mean, look at our kids. The pandemic, during the pandemic, anxiety and depression in our kids skyrocketed, right? And we know that firsthand. It was all kinds of bad, and it was the connection that we missed, right? All because we couldn't be together, right? Now, there were other factors at play there, but I would argue that it was the disconnect that made everything worse, right? So I know that today we're talking about the idea of joy, right? But I don't think that we can do that without the idea of connection. So I'm going to argue this morning that it's connection, the idea of connection, that actually produces joy, okay? But before we do that, very quickly, I want to separate joy and happiness. And I don't want to oversimplify what those two things mean, but I believe the biggest difference between joy and happiness is that happiness is externally focused and is dependent on what's happening around me, right? And happiness can be fleeting. It doesn't make it wrong, right? Like, it's not wrong to be happy. It's not wrong to do things that make you happy. I just think happiness is externally focused and isn't consistent because it's based on the things that are happening around us. It's also based on things that sometimes are outside of my control, right? But the difference for joy is the idea that it's internally focused and is not driven by things around me, but driven by something that's happening within me. So, like, I can feel happy about my team winning, right? Or sad because they lost to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, people, they haven't had an SEC win in like 10 years, and then they beat Kentucky and beat Florida. So that's on our record. Yay. So happy, right? But my circumstances, those things are going to change, right? But I can still choose joy. I can still have joy independent of the circumstances that are going on around me, right? Now, not only am I saying that joy comes from connection, but I'm going to say specifically connection with the divine and then connection with each other, all right? So what I want to do this morning is there's one in one of the teachings that Jesus, it's the vine and the branches. And people typically use this teaching to talk about how if you are separated from the vine, you can't do anything. It's a very guilt and shame-driven kind of teaching. And I think when we do that, we completely miss the point of what Jesus is actually talking about. And it's in John's account of chapter 15, and we're going to have it here up on the screen. If you'll go ahead and show that passage. It says this, yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. See, I mean, he says it, but then that's like the focus, but it's not the point. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into the pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my word remains in you, you may ask anything. For anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. That brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you, even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. So first I'm going to say that that joy comes from our connection with the divine. And what Jesus is doing here is he's using the agricultural of the day to like symbolize this idea of connection, right? Branches to a vine, okay? So that's simple enough, right? The vine provides everything to the branch that the branch needs to be fruitful, right? It provides everything. The branch doesn't have to worry about doing or being anything because it's connected to the vine and doing what it naturally does, right? So I will also say that the point of this passage isn't some sort of eternal condemnation, because people love to take that part about the branch that's not being used and it's going to be tossed into the fire. No, he's not talking about anything in the afterlife. Jesus talked about the afterlife many times, and he was never shy about letting people know what he was saying when he was talking about the afterlife. And there's no language here that talks about anything that's coming next. He's literally just talking about what happens to branches that no longer produce grapes off of the vine. What do? You prune them, right? That's it. That's all he's talking about. It's not something that's coming next. But I was taught that this was some sort of eternal thing, right? There you go. And that if I didn't obey his commandments, that I would be tossed aside, that I would be tossed in the pile to be burned. And as a child growing up in the church, I internalized that deeply. And all that teaching did for me as a kid was produce guilt and produce a ton of shame. All right? If I didn't do these things, then I would go to hell. That's what I thought. And the commandments that I were taught to obey were things like, you got to be at church every Sunday, right? Or, well, in our case, it was like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then any of the little extra things that happen through the week. You got to, that's, if you're not there, what's wrong? How's your walk with Jesus, Joe? It's fine, I guess. I don't know. But that's how it was. So it was showing up to church every time it was open. It was reading your Bible every day. It was praying every day. It was like memorizing scripture. And I'll be honest, I still struggle with that stuff. I'm horrible at praying because my brain is just like, you have so much to do. What are you doing? Right? I'm still horrible at it. All right? But that's what it did in my life. And it was this extreme guilt and extreme shame to the point where it created this compulsion in my life. I don't remember the compulsion started, but I was early elementary school, and I felt like I had to pray before I went to sleep, because if I didn't pray before I went to sleep, then there could be sins that are unforgiven, and if I die with unforgiven sins in my life, I wouldn't go to heaven. So every single night, I said the same prayer. To the point, and I'm talking into my 30s, I said this prayer every single night, and I could not go to sleep if I didn't say this prayer. There were times where I would lay down and I'd be like just laying there, and I could not go to sleep. And I'm like, I'm so tired, why can't I go to sleep? And then it would finally dawn on me, I didn't say my prayers, and I would say my prayers, and I would be able to go to sleep. This happened every night, same prayer for decades, so I wouldn't go to hell. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Amen. Bless Mommy, Daddy, Mike, Coco, Jake, Joy, aunts and uncles, cousins, all my friends, Mamo, Pepple. Great kiss for Grandma Smith and me. I said that every night for decades. Doesn't, I think back on that, and doesn't that sound ludicrous? I mean, doesn't that sound insane? But that's what we've taught. That's what the church has taught for generations, for decades here in the United States. We have focused on this checklist of things to be able to remain in him that he's not even talking about. So we've like superimposed this behavior modification that this is what it looks like to follow Jesus, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what he's talking about. So we've completely missed the point of what Jesus is saying. He's talking about that God is the source. That this idea of connection to the vine, to God, is where we receive the nourishment that we need. That's the whole point of what he's talking about. Now, Most of you guys know me well enough to know that I'm a huge Dave Matthews fan. My wife and I have been to a million of his concerts. We love Dave Matthews. There is a particular song that Dave sings, and that's what we real fans call him, Dave. Okay? Am I wrong? Yeah. The rest of you can address him as Mr. Matthews. But there's this song that he sings, and it's called Bartender. All right? And the song is he's sitting in a bar and he's asking for the wine that released Jesus from the grave after 3 days in the ground. And there's this imagery of that the wine that's drinking him is the wine that strung Judas from the devil's tree, deep in the ground, roots deep in the ground. And it's this beautiful imagery. And if you read what it's about, Dave is talking about finding redemption at this bar in heaven where God is the bartender. And he refers to God as the bartender because God is the one from whom all blessings flow. Right? And so it's this really beautiful imagery of this. And this is what this passage is talking about. This is literally what Jesus is talking about. That God is the source, that God is the one from whom everything flows. And like the branch that needs nourishment from the vine, so do we. Right? We need the same nourishment. Let me ask you a question. Does the branch worry about what it needs to do? No. Does the branch just receives what it needs and then does what it does? Absolutely. The branch does what it does because it's connected to the vine and doesn't worry about what it's supposed to do or not do. It just does what it does because it's connected to the vine. So, unfortunately, though, we're not branches, right? Branches don't choose anything. They're just branches. We have a choice. Like we have